Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 152. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Station. Dave, glad to have you back. Appreciate Ross McCorkle filling in on the Wednesday show, but Dave has returned. Obviously, news cycle still pretty slow, so sort of going to recap what happened on Wednesday. Want to get Dave's fresh thoughts on some of the Steelers moves and the Brendan Sorsby situation. So, Dave, how you doing?
All right, happy Friday. It's a great day to be alive. Got my pup taken care of. He had a bad GI tract infection, and oh boy, I could fill you in on some nasty details, but I'll save you from all that. What's happened in this house over the course of the last several days, but thankful that the great Ross McCorkle could sit in with you on the Wednesday show. Kind of an exciting day. USA versus Australia in World Cup today. I'd imagine a lot of the listeners will be paying attention to that. I think the Pirates are starting a series in Colorado this evening, so that'll get some attention. And of course, it's Spaghetti Day in our household as well too. So that's nice as well too. And a lot has kind of happened with this whole Brendan Sorsby thing since I think we last left off, at least with me. I know you and Ross probably tackled some of it on the show the other day. So with it now looking like he's going to be part of the supplemental draft here. I'll have you some of my updated thoughts on that, and we'll cover kind of some of the speculation I think going on with him, not only Steelers related, but I think kind of across the landscape of the NFL as well too. So if you don't want to listen to Brendan Sorsby talk today, you probably click the stop button right now. But anyway, how are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, and I know Sorsby can be a bit of a tired topic, but it is the dead of the offseason. It's still a discussion point for all NFL teams to have. It's really a unique situation and one worth talking about until this finality of knowing where his NFL destination is. But before we do that, let's sort of recap the other things Ross and I talked about on the Wednesday show. Pittsburgh making a couple of roster moves since you and I last spoke, Dave. They signed a receiver in Levi Wentz. They released a couple players in Dalen Carnell and Aiden LaRosse, the punter. Carnell was the undrafted free agent out of Missouri, and the team has also signed linebacker Jacoby Windmon. The team itself, I don't believe, has announced it yet, but I think it's already hit the transaction sheet. Windmon posted it on his Instagram story that he was signing with Pittsburgh, and so the Steelers adding a UFL player to the roster.
Yeah, it is officially official according to the NFL transaction sheet. So probably we'll see the Steelers probably formally announce that at some point on this Friday. I think we covered a little bit of the other moves because I remember talking about the dead money with the undrafted free agent.
I think that was on the live stream of the podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're probably all these days are running together. Thanks for keeping me straight there. About Windmon, you get a guy that's obviously familiar with the organization, has bounced around obviously quite a bit. I think originally an undrafted free agent for the Steelers a couple years ago, a guy that can play inside, outside. I think some of the clips that the UFL has highlighted, at least on their Twitter page, shows some of the pass rushing prowess with him. Basically has had all he's had is a little bit of a cup of a coffee, I guess, with the Steelers overall. But we did talk about once they parted ways with the undrafted free agent linebacker that we would likely maybe see them add to the position group. And once again, you get another guy that some position flexibility with him, a guy that I think got some special teams knack to him as well too. He's going to be on the outside looking in, as you would imagine, when it comes to roster bubble or roster chances at this time. But I mean, we continue to. I think the big overview here is we continue to see the Steelers, the flow and change at the back end of the roster here and trying to get this thing dialed in before the start of training camp. You see what Daryl Porter back with this team now as well too as part of the recent transactions, and he's a guy that obviously has familiarity with the organization. So you always like to have the best possible 91-man roster that you can going into training camp, and I applaud the Steelers for making some of these moves like they're doing to try to make that a reality there. And the punter, we hardly even knew him. It will be interesting to see if this team does add another punter between now and the start of training camp. You would at least think there's a pretty strong chance of that happening. And I imagine too, if they don't, that they'll be kind of monitoring the what goes on in the preseason here, moving forward later on into the summer, and kind of scouting some of those guys along with watching their own veteran punter in Cameron Johnston. And I don't think you can completely rule out if a guy like Cameron Johnston struggles, or during training camp and the preseason, that maybe potentially a punter on another roster could wind up in Pittsburgh, at some point. But Cameron Johnston's the veteran right now. He's a guy with the odds-on chance to be at least a week one punter for this team, and we'll have to just see if he gets any competition brought in for training camp here over the course of the next, I guess 5.5 weeks at this point here.
I imagine he will. Just logistically, it's tough to go through a whole training camp and preseason with only one punter, unless there is some other plan that I'm not aware of. You just think about a special teams period when they punt, at least under Mike Tomlin. I know things could be different under Mike McCarthy. They'll punt, 10, 15 times during a period, and the punters will rotate. So one guy will punt, the other one will step in. It's a lot on one guy to do it. We've seen Mike McCarthy put a lot on one guy's plate before in Drew Aller and him being the only quarterback in rookie minicamp, but that's a little bit different for a shorter time period. So we'll see, but I still would imagine a punter will get added, which would require a corresponding roster move because the roster is full right now with the addition of Jacoby Windmon, who impressed his rookie training camp in 2024 in Pittsburgh. Went to Carolina, got some playing time there. So I think that was an upgrade over Dalen Cardell, as you said. It's a back of the roster move, but I think it speaks to Mike McCarthy and the organization trying to improve the roster every which way, top to bottom.
Yeah, I guess at this point now, with we're at the end of the first week following the official, I guess, end of the offseason program. And then now that the UFL stuff has kind of cycled through, I wouldn't imagine there's going to be that much more shuffling on the roster between now and training camp. But I mean, it is worth watching to see if maybe a punter is brought in at this point. But and a good thing that my 90-30 series hasn't started yet, because as we've seen in the past, even though I've started it late before, it's ended up being like 93 or 94 players that end up being in that series because of moves that have taken place after the official end of the offseason program here. So we'll sit and watch, and we'll write about and talk about the players that are brought in moving forward. But I wouldn't imagine we're going to be busy recapping a lot of roster moves between now and the team reporting to Latrobe.
Agreed. It may be special teams related in terms of a punter and, of course, an assistant coach who may get added to replace Darius Swinton. I imagine that move will happen before training camp begins. So I took a peek in the back end of the site today that your first 90-30 looks like it's ready to go, which to me is kind of the start of the season beginning when Dave Bryan starts introducing his new 90-30.
Yeah, that's that. And look, the good thing about that is a lot of these, futures players and a lot of these younger kids added, it gives me an opportunity to learn a lot more about them as well, too. So, and then, as usual, as part of the recap, I give my own kind of outlook for the player when it comes to potential roster chances or, potential practice squad candidates. And so, yeah, it's a time filler. It's I introduce some 3 players at a time in this, and it usually ends up, I guess, being around 31 or 32 posts. And I plan on running those every day. I think the first one's set to run on Monday, and then every day following that, it should be 3 new players. They'll go in alphabetical order. In fact, I think the first one at the very top is, at least right now, is Drew Aller that I have written up there. But there'll be 3 in each post, and yeah, that's part of my off-season contributions to the site as part of the series here.
Just quickly, Drew Aller still no contract, still the only unsigned rookie in Pittsburgh. Is that just the natural process of a slow summer and something that should get resolved before training camp?
Oh, yeah, I would be absolutely shocked if he's not signed by the start of training camp. I think the player right above him and right after him remain unsigned as well too. And you don't know exactly what are holding these things up. Could it be split salary language? Could it be uh just watching some of the who really knows with these things? But I think he's boxed in at this point outside of the guys, right, one guy right ahead of him, I think, and one guy right after him, and it might take movement on one of those ends to finally get some finality with that. But I would be shocked if this lingers into the start of training camp.
Agreed. Have any of the quarterbacks drafted ahead of him signed? I know the first rounders haven't, and that's a different ball of wax, but just to look quarterback to quarterback. And is Carson Beck, I think we talked about this. Did he sign his contract in Arizona yet?
Let's see
I know he was
here.
drafted around earlier and 15 or so picks ahead. And so it's a little different situation, but it may just be one of those things where Allers wants to see Beck sign first, or his agent wants to see that happen just to get confirmation of what that deal looks like before getting to anything finalized
Yeah,
with the Steelers.
I'm not showing him as signed. So, and look, I would think now the when you look at the entire 2026 NFL draft class at this point, I haven't seen an update on how many remain unsigned, but I would imagine that list of players is probably, how many do you reckon it is? Under 20 at this point? Let's
Oh, it's got to
see.
be. Again, both first round quarterbacks have yet to sign, Mendoza and Simpson, Beck, Aller, and then it's got to be pretty small from there.
Let's see if I can pull up a tracker, some sort of tracker on this to see who might remain unsigned at this point. And of course, the one site that I go to is slow to load. I'll update you maybe later on through this podcast as I find out how many actual players remain unsigned from the overall draft. Okay, let's see. Mendoza, I guess, is still unsigned. Looks like Ty Simpson remains unsigned.
Mm-hmm. Yep, both quarterbacks
Uh,
have it. Unsigned.
Gabe Jack Jacobs for the Patriots, pick number 55.
He's probably one of
Uh,
those borderline second round
yeah.
guaranteed guys, maybe sort of.
Looks like Beck through Romeo Height, and that would be picked 65 through 70. Those guys remain unsigned. You got Aller, and it looks like Caleb Doug. It looks like both guys on both sides are signed. Chris McClellan, unless I missed something, let me see if McClellan is signed yet according to Over the Cap there. I've got one list that says he is not signed and another one. Okay, yeah, McClellan is actually signed, and he was the player picked after Aller. And then Caleb Douglas, the player drafted before Aller. It looks like he might be signed as well too, which is interesting. I hadn't followed up on this in a while. Yeah, Caleb is signed as well too. Fully okay. Here's the fully guaranteed money on Caleb Douglas, and it's only the signing bonus with him. And then the player drafted after Aller, I said, was who? That would
McClellan.
be McClellan, Chris McClellan. I would imagine that only his signing bonus is fully guaranteed, is the only part of the fully guaranteed money. Let me pull that up. Fully guaranteed would be his signing bonus as well too, although he does have workout bonuses put into his contract starting 50,000 a year from 2027 to 2029. So Aller is officially boxed in overall there. Trying to find
Are there
out.
any picks later than him that are unsigned anywhere in the
Yeah,
draft? Just curious.
yeah, looks like, and I'm going by Football Database, so they do a pretty good job of keeping this updated
Mhm.
here. Caleb Proctor, who was 104 overall, through Grayson Halton, 107 overall. That's a group of 4 players that remain unsigned, and it looks like everybody after that has been signed. So going by this tracker, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Looks like 15 players remain unsigned at this point here. So and obviously the quarterbacks, Mendoza, Simpson, Beck, and
Drew
Aller
Aller.
are the 4 unsigned quarterbacks at this point. So it'll get done, especially knowing that Aller is boxed in at this point. It's hard to know for sure what indeed is holding that up, but I would be quite surprised if Aller is unsigned come the start of training camp. Jamar McCoy doesn't look like he is signed yet, number 101 overall.
Okay. Yeah, that was a unique situation given his injury and draft weekend free fall first round talent with the concerns about his knee long term. I know Proctor got hurt. I think he's going to be out for the season or potentially out for the season, so maybe a complicating factor on his rookie contract now. Carson Beck, the quarterback, that's a shoe probably waiting to drop in Drew Aller's camp. The Cardinals report to training camp July 22nd, so a couple days ahead of Pittsburgh, and so Beck should be signed before then. And so at the latest, Aller would get signed probably the 23rd or 24th.
If Aller's hope, well, I think I said this several podcasts ago, if Aller's hoping any sort of guarantees, maybe related to a Beck deal, end up impacting him in any way, good luck with that. Especially the gap between him and where Beck was taken. Let's see, Beck was what 65th overall, and Aller was 76 overall. I mean, I guess it's worth holding out hope for if you're him, but
Mhm.
it would be quite interesting to see because of the actual players before him and after him, and Caleb Douglas and Chris McClellan only getting guaranteed money related to the signing bonus. Aller be hard pressed to get some guaranteed money in there outside of the signing bonus. Now, once again, this might be split contract related, meaning if he was to go on IR, he would have a split salary specifically, maybe in his rookie year. Maybe he's trying to fight for full salary if he goes on who knows what's holding it up at this point.
Right. It's all details. It'll get done before training camp, but just wanted to check in because I know that that was something we've mentioned before and it's still unresolved and we're all waiting for it to happen. But no big alarm. It should get done before training camp and not interrupt any part of his rookie season.
Uh-huh.
All right, Dave, let's talk about Brendan Sorsby. I know it's been talked about to death a lot already, but it is a really interesting situation, and I've yet to get your thoughts on the podcast on Brendan Sorsby, who appears to be headed for the supplemental draft sometime next month. The NFL still has to officially grant and approve that. That has not happened yet, but we imagine it will happen in due time, which will leave Pittsburgh in the rest of the NFL deciding whether or not to take the chance on him, submit a bid, and if so, what round pick do you submit on him? So a lot of layers here. There's been plenty spoken about Sorsby in Pittsburgh already, plenty more to come, but where do you stand? What are your thoughts, Dave?
All right. Where I last left off with him, I was kind of glad that it looked like he was going to potentially go back and play one more year in college. And I'm not going to get into the right and the wrong and the whole ineligible and the rulings and the laws. That's I haven't gone that deep with it and all. I mean, let's just approach it from the aspect now that it definitely looks like he's not returning to college, and it looks like he's going to be part of this year's supplemental draft. So let's start from that aspect there. Do I think that Sorsby is worthy of overall of a first round supplemental draft selection? Personally, my answer to that is no. Now, I think we've seen who was it, Dane Brugler and a couple of these other draft nicks come out and say, look, he was kind of slated to be a third round grade had he had come out this year, and really nothing's really changed other than obviously, people knowing a little bit more about, the betting situation with him in college, and that, I think Dane put it kind of bluntly that, had Sorsby thought that he'd be a slam dunk first round pick coming out this year, he would have declared for the draft and went into the draft that way there. What has changed with this kid? I mean, the tape is still the tape as far as he goes. Personally, in the brief study that I've done with him, there's nothing that makes me think that he's a bona fide first round supplemental draft guy. I will say this though, I think that a team will put in more, at least one team will put in some sort of supplemental draft bid on Brendan Sorsby. Yes, and I think that's a captain obvious response when it comes to that. I think the question then becomes is where he will ultimately go. Personally, I don't think I would put in a bid of higher than a third round pick for him. However, I think any team that is looking for a potential franchise quarterback right now, especially moving into next year, I think, and there is, according to reports, a lot of teams doing some extended homework on him, trying to get to the bottom more so of the gambling issues that he has. Uh, you know, Teams I think are calling, wanting to know what he runs and things of that nature, and doing more deeper dives into the character aspect. I would imagine that the scouting department's already had a good idea, uh, leading up to his decision to go back to school, of what he is as a player, his strength and weaknesses. It's not like these guys, even guys that, scouting departments have to always plan ahead and have a pretty good idea, even if kids aren't coming out this year, of what potentially of where they might be headed the following year there. Uh, if a team has done their homework on him and truly believes that he has a potential to be a franchise quarterback, well, then obviously a first or a second round pick comes into play with him. If you want a slam dunk opportunity and increase your chances heavily of getting him in the supplemental draft, well, then obviously you're going to have to put in a first round pick for him. If you want to play the poker game here, a second round pick would probably give you a fighter's chance at getting him in a situation, particularly when it comes to the Steelers. uh I think you have to look at this and say, this is a guy that we think has potential to be a franchise quarterback. We've done our homework on him. We're comfortable with the background in the gambling situation. Would we be willing to put in a second round uh, uh, compensatory pick on him? And if you are willing to do that, then and you have to believe maybe you have a fighter's chance at getting him in the supplemental draft. In my opinion, you have to do so with the game plan of, hey, all right, we're going to go ahead. If we get him, we're going to carry four quarterbacks on the 53-man roster throughout the 2026 season here, with those 4 players being Aaron Rodgers, Drew Aller, Will Howard, and then Sorsby. And then going into it with the idea that you're setting up this massive competition next offseason with these three young quarterbacks to figure out, which one of these, which one gives you the best shot of potentially maybe being your week 1 starter. With Sorsby this late in the process right now, and the supplemental draft's not even happening for until the month of July. It's going to be hard to get him introduced into your system and get him any kind of valuable training camp work in my eyes in 2026. You obviously could probably get him in the back end of some preseason games later on this year, but you would have to think that most of your focus is going to be on getting Will Howard and Drew Aller the majority of the reps there. In other words, it becomes and here's the other thing: if you don't spend a first round draft pick on a supplemental draft pick on Sorsby, then you obviously don't get the 5th-year option that comes along with that. So initially, what you're saying is we're willing to completely waste 1 year with Sorsby, get him into the system, get him into what you can of a McCarthy quote unquote quarterback school, and with all eyes on him potentially competing for the starting job, likely with Drew Aller and Will Howard all next offseason there. Yeah. So, to me, if you're going to willing to go as far as a 2nd round draft supplemental draft pick with him, or even really a 3rd round pick for if that ends up what lands him in Pittsburgh there, to me the mindset would be, all right, we essentially have a 52-man roster to work with throughout the season here, because I would like to see the team. Now, this is me talking, and people say, well, Will Howard is a 6th-round guy. Do you really have to carry him at this point? Could you just carry Mason Rudolph and let that be part of your 4-man group? Okay, fine. However you want to paint it between the whole Mason Rudolph, Will Howard thing. I'm fine whatever way people think that the organization needs to go that way. Do I think 5 quarterbacks on the roster is feasible? No, I do not. I think it comes down to how serious are the Steelers are him with what they have found in his background and his potential for development, versus how willing they are to basically create a potential 3 quarterback competition next offseason there. And then obviously too, people are going to say, well, don't forget, you've got next year's class coming out. What if they get a chance at a 1st rounder, depending on how they finish in record in 2026? You still have to be open to the possibility of that happening there. I would not put in a 1st-round draft pick supplemental pick if I'm the Steelers on him. I guess if the team has done their homework and feels like he would be worthy of being in a serious quarterback competition along with Will Howard and Drew Aller next offseason, I guess I would be on board with them giving up a 2nd-round pick for him. And that's where I'm at. Look, a lot of the background stuff we don't know and we'll never know. I would expect them to do their homework on him and have the private eyes looking into how serious. Here's and I'm rambling here, I know, but I'll give you another extension to this that a lot of teams, any team that drafts him, has to think about.
Mm-hmm.
This betting tag on Sorsby is going to follow him the rest of his NFL career at this point. He will always be associated with this tag that comes with him. And with that, it's going to be people wondering, whether it be media, local guys, teammates, whatever. If he loses a game, people always go, well, did he throw that game? Now, look, the NFL tracks this stuff. It'll be hard for Sorsby to get around placing bets on any platform or a bookie or anything moving forward here. And then you do have to wonder about the aspect too, about what was Sorsby even thinking here in today's landscape, where you see even professional athletes get caught up with being names on the list of DraftKings or whatever betting application? How did this kid not know that this stuff would have come to surface? And if he's that ignorant to have still done it anyway, then boy, the gambling addiction is pretty strong with him, or he's just not that wise of a kid there. So that goes back into the character research, the background research with him overall. But make no mistake, whatever team ends up landing him, there is always going to be the betting issue lingering throughout his career, and he can expect the comments on Twitter, the snide comments. Well, he probably threw that game. How much money did he have on those kind of things there? And if you think his character's strong, you've got to have a pretty good feeling that his character's strong enough to overcome it. And from an organizational standpoint, that teams are going to be able to handle the constant talk of the betting tag being handed to them. That's a lot of things to consider, and that goes on top of just what does the tape say about this kid, and what are the prospects of him potentially becoming a franchise quarterback for this team. So long story short, if I'm the Steelers, do I put in a first round compensatory pick on him? No. Do I think there's at least one team out there that might be willing to? I don't know where a lot of these other teams, the Jets and I don't know, name off. Look, could you see the Bengals even getting in this thing? Probably not with a first round pick, but maybe with a second or third round pick to have more of a legitimate, backup to Joe Burrow over there. I don't know. I think obviously the list of teams willing to put in a first or second round compensatory pick on Sorsby next month is small. I don't think the Steelers should put in a first round pick, but if they're doing their homework and they firmly believe once again that they're fine with the background on the whole betting situation, and they're fine with the potential of this kid maybe being part of a three-headed competition to be a franchise quarterback starting in 2027, I could potentially be on board with that. But there's a lot that goes into his background research that we don't know. We can pretend to know, but quite frankly, we'll never know when it comes to that.
There is a lot from the outside that we don't know, but there is a good amount that we do know. We have a good understanding of what exactly he did in terms of placing bets, and there's no evidence that he bet against his team or was any part of any sort of point shaving situation. But I understand that the allegations and rumors and Twitter comments will follow Sorsby like that during his NFL career. No question about that. But just to sort of reset things from the top, based on what you and I know, what's out there in the public purview, is Sorsby's gambling saga and addiction and scandal, is that disqualifying? Because that's really where teams have to start. Is this going to be a disqualifying act by Brendan Sorsby that takes him off the board and makes the tape moot? Now, during the Wednesday show, Ross mentioned that Mike DeFabo said that for Pittsburgh, according to him, that it was not disqualifying. They were continuing to do their homework despite this gambling scandal. And all teams should do their homework no matter what to come to the best and most informed conclusion possible. But in your mind, is the gambling aspect of it disqualifying that makes you say, we're not even going to put a bid of any sort on this guy?
I mean, look, this is the same team that signed Michael Vick after the dogfighting stuff and all like that.
But there's different people now evaluating that. I understand your point, but it's not the same people making that decision.
Well, look, once again, we're dealing with things that we don't know as well too. Big picture, do I think it's a big picture? Do I think it's as tough to overcome long term? People can change, right? The short answer is no. Do I think this is a removal from the draft board just based on what I know with the gambling situation. And once again, I want to qualify that what we know, there's other layers to it on top of it. I mean,
What
from
do you think
my
we don't know? What do you think we're missing?
I just some of the means of I think he placed had other people place bets for him, and just how deep does the gambling addiction run, I guess, and what if some of the experts or people, which I would imagine there's confidentiality in a lot of these things there. Is this guy tied to, I don't want to bring up mob type stuff, or is he in too deep over his head in other aspects? Does he owe people?
Mhm.
There's so many different layers to this that we could spend an hour on, I think. I just think loosely, big picture, do I think the gambling thing, uh based on what we think that we know, would be a disqualifying thing when it comes to the Steelers, big picture wise? Personally, I would like to say no. That's my opinion.
Fair. I think I lean more towards yes, it is in general and specifically for Pittsburgh. When you have a first year head coach, albeit a veteran one like Mike McCarthy, do you really want to bring this major distraction for a player, as you said, who's not going to have any sort of meaningful role on your team this year at the least, and who knows what it looks like going forward? It's hard for a team that espouses he's a Steeler and Steeler values and Steelers character and is generally taking pretty squeaky clean guys in terms of not having big off field scandals whenever they draft. Who was the last player Pittsburgh drafted that had a big off field scandal? They've had some guys that were some difficult personalities, but even George Pickens didn't have the off field stuff. I mean, I was trying to rack my brain with Ross on Wednesday. I think maybe Mike Adams was the last
Right.
one who had an off field thing, and that was, marijuana test back whenever that was, the NFL, banned it and punished players for it. They generally draft guys that are really high character and don't have that kind of baggage. And to do it for the quarterback, the face of your franchise, and say, this is going to be the face of our franchise, this
Right.
guy marred in this gambling scandal, I think it's a really tough sell.
Right, and you have to have faith in your organization to be able to support and rally around that, because like I said, there's going to be this guy is forever going to be attached to this, and it's not going to go away. 10 years from now, even if he has even if this guy becomes one of the next best, franchise quarterbacks, top 5, let's say, in the NFL for the next, 10 years or whatnot, this is always going to be attached to him. It's always going to be, uh, uh, I look at Ozuna with the Pirates. Every time that guy comes up to bat in a visiting stadium, it's DUI, DUI.
Hmm.
This stuff is always going to be attached to him, and if he goes through a bad spell, it's always going to be magnified too, saying, he's always going to have his critics tied to that in some way, shape, or form. So you do have to have faith that you have a strong enough organization to constantly overcome what will be probably a here and there distraction.
Sure, I understand that. But as you said, people can change and people can move past some of their biggest mistakes. Mike Vick is an example of that. He did an awful, awful thing. He paid the price for it as he should have, but he's kind of been welcomed back into society. I was watching the college football and Madden unveiling earlier this month, and Mike Vick was there playing video games with, I think, Cam Newton. And so everyone's kind of moved past the dogfighting scandal and situation that got him in jail and really transformed and changed his NFL career and outlook. So, Sorsby could get past this, but how long that takes obviously is a different story. And to some degree, as you said, it will always follow him, especially whenever he throws that game losing interception. People will sit there and wonder. They wonder it about everybody today, regardless of gambling scandal or not. It's always something that gets talked about. And that's a whole other discussion probably, but you're right, and a team has to be strong enough to assume that. I think Pittsburgh is on paper strong enough for that, but do you want to willingly bring that in is still a separate question.
Look, I mean, they're not one-for-one similarities here, but remember a couple of years back, with the whole Cameron Sutton thing, they didn't shy away from that. Once again, we're talking about uh, uh, it's not apples to apples type situation there, and obviously Sutton on his return to Pittsburgh was backup kind of roster type player, but I mean it still didn't prevent the Steelers from doing it, and Sutton obviously had to answer the questions that came along with it, and it reoccurred, and constant talk about Cameron Sutton and his past transgressions as well too. So once again, it all comes down to, does the organization feel that they have the leaders and the coaching staff and just the organizational uh you know aspects to be able to handle the baggage that is and the distraction that it's going to be to some degree. Are they able to handle it?
Mhm.
Yeah, and look, this isn't a Mike Tomlin team anymore. You have to turn your attention to, is this something that Mike McCarthy even wants to deal with there?
Sure.
And we'll find out the answer to the question. Personally, do I think the Steelers can organizationally handle it? Yes. The question then becomes, do they want to be able to handle it,
Mhm.
and is the risk is a reward worth the risk? Is a potential reward worth the risk? That's why I think first round is totally out of the question for the Steelers, because any team that puts in a first round, should they put in a first round supplemental draft pick on Sorsby, they're saying that's their guy, and they're going to move in every direction that they can to make sure that guy has every opportunity to be the next franchise quarterback for a team. You second
You don't think
round,
second round says that? I think second
I
round still says that,
I
especially in the supplemental draft.
to a degree, but it's obviously not the dice roll that a first round pick is.
Yeah. And that's where I'm a little torn because I think it still says a lot about the Sourcebees. We really feel like he's going to be the guy. But also, if we're going to do this, we're going to have them all compete, Howard and Aller and Sorsby. The next high quarterback Pittsburgh drafts, Dave, should be viewed as the clear cut guy. That's my stance. Stop adding more competition and start having a real plan. If this is the guy we're going
Sure.
to use the lack of a better word, bet on to be the franchise guy. Because I don't know how many teams have had giant competitions of just a bunch of options and come out with a real strong outcome. Like look at the Browns right now. They're battling Shador and Watson, but they're not going to have their franchise guy come out of that. Even Minnesota, Kyler Murray and McCarthy, is that going to they're going to find their long term answer in that battle? Probably not. I think teams that find the long term guy, they draft him early, they declare them as the guy, they really focus all their energy on building that guy up, and that's where you have long term success.
Look, am I sitting here banging the table for them to draft him in a supplemental draft? No, I'm not.
Sure.
In fact, I would, from where I sit, I would be quite surprised uh, if they did even. I mean, does it hurt to even throw out knowing that you're probably not going to get them, but just in case of emergency, putting in a fifth round or fourth round uh, for him? I suppose there's no,
I think that makes less sense, to be honest with. I was telling
right,
Ross, like if you're gonna say it with your chest, if you really like this guy, say put a second round pick on him. Fifth round pick says we don't really like this guy, and we want to have the baggage and distraction. It just
right.
doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. I'm just giving kind of worst case kind of,
Yeah.
scenario there. But am I banging the table for the Steelers to put in a second round compensatory pick on him? No. I am trying to frame, however, where the team's head might be and why they might consider it. And
Hmm.
the only way I would consider, look, nothing on tape that I've seen so far, and I haven't gone on as deep on him as say Aller and Howard in previous times. What I've seen, nothing to me screams first round with him. Now, I view him personally as a third-round compensatory pick player, but if you did go that route, there's obviously no guarantee that you're going to get him. I would imagine there's probably a small list, a handful of teams willing to go that route with him. So then it goes once again, where's your conviction on him? If you're saying, we'll put in a third-round pick on him. If we get him, great. If we don't, fine. And if you do get him, what does that say? Well, like you said, we only put a third-round pick, but in the same breath, we're not quite there thinking this guy is going to be a franchise quarterback, just an in the mix type guy. And on the backside, we're inviting all the baggage that comes along with, no matter where you took him, whether you took him in the 7th or the 1st, that same level of baggage is of scrutinizing is still going to come with him. So, look, if you really are a believer in this kid and you believe you can get past all of it, and you want an almost foolproof chance of getting him, you're turning in a first round pick on him. Once again, I don't think the Steelers should do it. I would be surprised if they even put in a second round, or really, I'll be surprised. I think because of the makeup of the roster and the fact that they've got 2 young quarterbacks in Will Howard, and then once again, you have to be, because of the makeup of the roster right now. And once again, think whatever listeners want to think about Will Howard versus Mason Rudolph, fine. But I think if you do end up with Sorsby and you draft him in the supplemental draft, I think you've got to do so with the expectations of you're going to carry 4 quarterbacks on your 53-man roster, no ifs, ands, or buts, and then thus you have made yourself a 52-man roster, so to speak, because you're that lone team that has 4 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. So I'm merely outlining ways that I think the Steelers could potentially look at this with Sorsby if they did their homework, if they do all their homework, the background, they're comfortable with what they find. They think that he would have a chance to compete in a 3-headed monster next offseason. And then, they think they're a strong enough organization to handle all the baggage that is going to come along with Sorsby.
Whatever it's worth, a very small piece of information, but I was listening to Curt Cignetti, the Indiana head coach, on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and at the end of the interview, he was asked about, the Sorsby topic came up, and while Cignetti seemed to be happy that Sorsby was not going to return to college football and not, basically be able to just ignore the NCAA's ruling against sports betting because of that injunction that he received, Cignetti did endorse Sorsby as an NFL quarterback. He says, quote, "I know Brendan a little bit. He was actually in the program for about a week and a half when I was hired. I think he's an outstanding quarterback and a great kid. I think he's going to be a great pro with the proper support to overcome some of the issues he's had. I think he's got a lot of talent, and there will be an NFL team real happy to have him," end quote. And that's a little more notable because, of course, Curt Cignetti is the brother of Frank Cignetti Jr., who's the Steelers' senior assistant offensive coach. And so even though obviously Curt spent just the briefest of times with him, when college football's most prominent coach comes out with a big endorsement of you and your brother is on the Steelers staff, I think that's at least notable to mention.
Especially with the profile and the weight that Curt Cignetti, national champion, head college head coach right now, and a guy that doesn't beat around the bush, really.
Right. Yeah, he's not just giving PC answers.
Yeah. How much lip service is involved in there? Is he what's the agent relate? A lot of that stuff. Agent relationship. I mean, it is what it is. Does it factor in to some degree? I would imagine, but if I'm an organization, just because Curt Cignetti said that, I'm still going deep into my own investigation, obviously, into this kid. And I want to know how he ticks. I'm definitely talking to him quite a bit throughout this process, and I think the latest report is all 32 teams are going to be at his pro day coming up here, or or whatever they're calling it, workout, what have you. And look, I mean, why wouldn't you have some of there anyway? Because this is probably a potential guy that could be facing your own team in the NFL. So you want to learn as much more about him as possible. And
Who should Pittsburgh send?
Man, I McCarthy's the quarterback whisperer, right? I mean, if you're really serious about this kid, and I would send Weidel, Khan, and McCarthy to his workout if I was serious about him.
Okay. I mean, that's a big note to all other teams, though we are very interested in him, but I understand that it's more important to just do your own work. Now, McCarthy wasn't even at the Penn State Pro Day, so
Right.
he wasn't there to see Drew Allen, but obviously saw him at the Combine and probably pretty familiar with him. So, yeah, I wonder how teams will approach that. Will it be more low-level scouts to sort of just get some tape? I mean, obviously, the tape can get sent out. You don't have to be there in person, but you want to. I think to me, it's about getting to know the person, and you can do that at the workout. You can do that over Zoom calls that Pittsburgh, I think, is more fond of than they were in past years. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see who attends that workout.
I mean, even if you drafted this kid in Pittsburgh, all right, how much time can you actually spend with the kid and get him reps during training camp in the preseason, and then how quick a development, if you drafted Pittsburgh, what are the legitimate chances of this kid being your week one starter in 2027?
I mean, who knows? I really couldn't tell you. It depends on a lot of unknown variables. So, I mean, my stance is just to stay away. This is just not the guy and not the situation or the time to make that play for Sorsby.
And look, I mean, historically, we can always bring this into it. The Steelers have never, uh, to my knowledge, picked a player in a supplemental draft, right?
Not in the actual supplemental draft. There was, I mentioned this Wednesday too. I think it was the 84. They called it a supplemental draft. I think after the USFL folded, that there was a draft for that, and Pittsburgh used 3 picks, but that was something
Right.
a little bit different. But in the actual, what we know as the supplemental draft today, no, they never have.
I would, once again, I would boil this down to McCarthy's charge is to get a franchise quarterback in Pittsburgh here in the very near future. If Mike McCarthy, if I'm Omar Khan and Mike McCarthy came to me and said, "I've seen his tape, all right, and I like the prospects of it, and I would sign off on as long as as long as the organization is comfortable with his background and the potential of the distraction that he's going to be. If Mike McCarthy came to me and gave me his his okay with it, if I'm Omar Khan and Andy Weidel and everybody, I'm doing the rest of the homework, going deep, and if I feel at that point that I can make it work, then I would probably put in a second round pick on him.
All right, I know we're going to keep talking about it. The pro day is set for, I think, July 10th at a Texas high school. So, yeah, that's going to be the balance of the talent is there, but you're going to assume all this baggage. And if you are interested in him, what round pick do you want to use? I think reporting and thoughts have been a little all over the place. Some say second round. Some wonder if a team would use a first round selection. Some say third round. Some say day 3. And so he's going to get taken by somebody. We just don't know who and when and what that will look like.
I mean, you're not going to keep 5 quarterbacks if you if you were to draft him in a supplemental draft, right?
The Steelers will have a 53-man roster of 53 quarterbacks. They will take that strategy until they find somebody. No, they wouldn't keep 5. You imagine 4. But if you're taking Sorsby, then like, what does Will Howard's future even look like at this
Right.
point? It feels like he's not even going to be given a chance, and so why even carry Will Howard? I mean, it's just a lot of questions there. I just can't get past the Steelers, given how they draft and how they drafted even this year post Mike Tomlin. The things Omar Khan talks about, that he's a Steeler, that they got to fit the Steelers' bill, hearts and smarts. Even though Sorsby does have the size they look for at the position and does have the talent, and talent can win out. And I'm not going to pretend like Pittsburgh has had just choir boys over their history. Go back to even Ben at quarterback and all the allegations against him. And Pittsburgh weathered that storm, and even though they did try to trade him to San Francisco, point is they ended up holding on to him ultimately. But I think to take this kid right now in this situation for himself and for Pittsburgh, it's just hard for me to see that happen.
I agree. I agree. Now, look, I know let's hit this end of it as well too, because I know we'll probably get some emails or some questions about it. Some people say, well, you just go ahead and get them in a supplemental draft and you put them on IR. Or I don't know what other kind of list you could potentially put them on.
NFI.
NFI, because again, I don't look. I think Mike Florio brought up something interesting about a recent quarterback that had some gambling that didn't get a suspension, and framed it something along the lines of kind of the precedent has been set that that kid was not uh was not suspended by the NFL upon coming into the league. So it's reasonable to think that Sorsby would not be suspended either there. And assuming that is the case, man, there are still teams just can't constantly draft players and like throw their entire draft class on an IR list, right?
Well, he's got to be legitimately injured. I mean, you
Right.
can't just have the guy be literally healthy and then just stash him on IR. There's going to be a grievance for that.
Right. And I understand people thinking, well, there's ways around it because of it, but I don't think it's as clear cut as people think. Well, just say he has a hangnail and throw him on IR for the rest of the season,
Plus, I mean, obviously, he can still be around the team, but idle hands, et cetera, et cetera. And for a guy with
Hmm.
a self-admitted gambling addiction on IR, not practicing, not really feeling part of the team is probably not the healthiest thing for a guy who probably needs to be really part of a strong system and feels like he's being part of something meaningful to keep him on the straight and narrow.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to think about here. I mean, if this guy was a slam dunk first round draft pick, even as is right now, then why didn't he come out? And I know people will say, well,
Yeah.
there are a couple other, Chambliss and some of these others. What is it,
Dante Moore, Oregon was the
Dante
big one.
Moore? Well, all these kids have different rhymes and reasons as to why, but uh, I think he's a third round talent as he sits right now. If a team really wants him, they'll probably have to use, to be on the safe side, a second round supplemental draft pick on him. I imagine he'll end up anywhere between second or third round supplemental draft from some team.
I know that you mentioned because Hunter Decker, which is the player you're referencing,
Right.
was not suspended last year whenever he came out of the draft and his gambling scandal that sent him to a Iowa JUCO. I still believe it's possible that Sorsby could get suspended because A, the NFL is not always consistent in its rulings and methods. B, Deckers came out through the conventional draft. He was also just an undrafted free agent, like late round kind of a guy, not this high profile player. And so Sorsby's coming out of the supplemental draft, and we've seen guys get suspended who have gone through the supplemental draft before Terrell Pryor being one example of that. So I don't know if Sorsby's a slam dunk to avoid suspension. Now, in theory, that would almost, in a sense, help Pittsburgh's math because you could put him on the commissioner exempt list for the start of the season if he was suspended and
Right.
not have to carry on the 53. But there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of hoops to jump through, no question about that.
And will the NFL let teams know whether or not he's headed for suspension, or will they have a good
Mhm.
inkling of whether or not that's going to happen before the supplemental draft takes place?
Yeah, it's a pretty tight timeline for the NFL to come down on that, so it's certainly no guarantee.
Right. So you would have to assume that until you know something more, that you're going to have to figure out a spot on your
Mhm.
53 man roster on top of it. I mean, we're really getting into the uh you know deeper weeds when it comes to that. I mean, sure, if you knew he was going to get suspended for, let's say, 6 games, well, then obviously you could still have him practice during training camp and play in the preseason games, and then he would go on the commissioner's suspended list for however many games he's suspended, and you don't have to worry about tying up a 53 man roster spot until he comes off of it.
Right. Now, maybe teams will have an inkling if he's headed for a suspension of some sort of like when the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. They didn't know what exactly his suspension would be, but they knew there was going to be punishment there, and they were kind of having that in mind when they made that ultimately terrible deal. But yeah, it's one of those other variables that we may not have finality to once the draft rolls around.
Look, this just comes down to, is the juice worth the squeeze? Plain and simple.
Yep. And that's, yeah, and we've seen teams certainly overlook and be able to convince themselves that the player is worth it despite something off the field, and then the talent always wins out. And Scoresby has plenty of talent, and Pittsburgh could justify itself by saying he did a terrible thing, and he's owned it, and we're going to be there to support him. If he goes out there and he wins the Super Bowl for Pittsburgh, it'll be a great move by the Steelers in terms of how it's viewed. But it's just a very unSteeler like thing to do on multiple fronts. I don't expect it, but you never know. You can't
Right.
rule it out until
Right.
we get an answer.
I'm not going to sit here unequivocally and say he's not going to. I guarantee you, he's not going to land with Pittsburgh in a supplemental draft. I would. My bet is that he won't. But once again, we've outlined. The purpose of us talking this long about it today, and I know some people are saying, "Man, move on. He ain't worth it." Blah blah blah. But I wanted to outline every reason why I think it could potentially happen.
Well, I'll save the question for what team do you think will take him whenever we get closer to that date.
I think the Jets very well might, be honest with you.
I think it's going to be a dark horse team that we're not really talking about. Like I mentioned, the Chiefs, like something like that kind of surprises you. Where I think they're going to take Sorsby instead.
Right. He will get drafted, I think, in a supplemental draft, and I think as it just feels like second or third round with him, to be honest with you.
That seems likely, but we'll keep you posted. We'll see what Pittsburgh does at that pro day. Will be interesting for sure. All right, Dave, let's move on from here. Let's go to another quarterback that people are probably tired of talking about. So just want to mention this briefly. Kevin Colbert was on, I think it was SNR yesterday, and was asked about the Kenny Pickett draft pick, and Colbert in many ways defended the selection and said we drafted him to be a start and win quarterback, and he was, citing his career record of, I forget what it was, 14-10 or so. And so Colbert also sort of said that, sometimes it doesn't always work out the way that you exactly hope that it does, and the draft is unpredictable, but he still showed confidence that Pickett can have a really strong NFL career.
Well, if your quarterback wins is not a stat.
I was going to ask you this: is the Nile a river in Egypt?
Yeah. Yes, they won with him, but did they win because of him?
Yeah, certainly more in spite of.
Right.
Now, I mean, in a sense, had some other rookie come in that was really unpolished and threw a bunch of turnovers, I understand Colbert's point, but Pickett was point blank, just was not the quarterback he was drafted to be.
No. Do you understand why they did it? Especially in Colbert's situation, probably wanting to put an exclamation point on, well, I left this team with a franchise quarterback, and obviously was there through the whole Ben thing, and would it have helped his resume even more had Pickett hit? Yes, but he's trying to die on that hill.
Yeah, so we'll see what Pickett's career looks like, but I think it's pretty much well formed at this point. It's career backup journeyman, and Colbert probably would have been better just owning it, but he's still trying to squint and look. And I know the bottom line is, quarterback win. That's your goal as a quarterback. Get out of each game with a victory. If you do that, then mission accomplished. But we know that Pickett was not often the catalyst. I mean, he did have a couple of clutch moments. The
Baltimore
Raiders game, the Baltimore game.
Yeah.
I mean, there were certainly some moments there, but they were literally just that moments.
Yep. And then, the way he handled the whole Russell Wilson thing, and what seemingly got him traded, what isn't a good look, on top of it. And if I was Colbert, I would just take the L there and move on.
Same. All right, Dave, let's do a quick Steelers salary cap update. You had a post go up on the site yesterday afternoon, evening, giving a latest update on where Pittsburgh sits cap-wise.
Yeah, not a lot has changed, especially with these recent transactions and all impacting the rule of 51 as of still this yesterday morning, and as of still this morning, the Steelers are a little more than $6 million under the cap in real time at this point. They have 92 players, I guess, technically under contract, even though one of those players is Drew Aller. He's property of the team, so you might as well consider him under contract, even though right now his base salary of $885,000 does not impact the rule of 51. It will impact the rule of 51 the moment that he does sign his rookie contract because of the signing bonus proration impacting it. So not 91 players under contract, 92 technically, because you still have the one player in Daquan Hardy on the reserve injured list on a split salary. Daquan does not hit the cap or will not impact the cap until week one. If he's still on IR at that point, then his 515,000 split salary will then impact the salary cap at that time. So they are a little more than $6 million under the cap right now, pending Drew Aller signing his contract. When you look at the forthcoming expected offseason salary cap expenses with this team, things like roster bonus charge, draft class with Aller and his 216,000 that'll impact the cap. The end of the rule of 51 with the 52nd and 53rd players being added, the practice squad, how many players will start the season on the reserve injured list that will impact the injury settlements that this team will have throughout training camp with players. And then the age-old, how much cap room will this team want to start the regular season with, which we call an injury replacement fund buffer. I have them at nearly 9.7 million over the cap. We'll be watching to see who, if any, will be restructured. DK Metcalf, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith are obviously the candidates for that. I still believe Metcalf would be the first player that they go to for a restructure. Either him or Watt. I would rank them Metcalf, Watt, and Highsmith as far as the probability rankings go. When it comes to that, it feels almost necessary, especially if this team gets Joey Porter Jr. signed to an extension. His cap hit would likely increase as a result of such an extension. If they were to get Keanu Benton signed to an extension, there's a decent chance his cap hit would actually decrease as a result of that. You're going to have players that are currently in the rule of 51 that won't ultimately make the 53-man roster. So you'll have a little bit of probably cap savings as that washes out come week one. Not significant, probably. And then you've got players such as Malik Harrison that will continue to watch his status with a $4.75 million cap charge. What's going to happen with Mason Rudolph? You save a couple of million after roster displacement. Should you move on or trade him? There. So overall, this team, they still have room to work with. I think potentially they could still get Joey Porter Jr. signed to an extension and Keanu Benton signed to an extension, and the offset of whatever cap increases come from that would still fit it within that $6 million range, but it still does feel like this team is headed for a restructure at this point moving forward. And yeah, that's it.
All right, so the next update will probably come if another extension gets done, and we'll kind of go from there. But I think you've covered it pretty well.
All right. So we'll continue to watch the back end, maybe manipulation of this roster. I wouldn't think that any back end moves were going to severely impact the rule of 51 and thus eat up a lot of additional cap space. Once again, Drew Aller, I believe, would once he signs, that'll impact it by I think 216,000 and some change that way because of the bonus proration with him. And Yeah, we're just watching to see what happens with Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton are obviously the two biggest names that we could see contract extensions between now and week 1 of the regular season.
All right, Dave, anything else for us to discuss? Any late breaking news?
Not that I'm seeing. I guess what Palazzo from PFF predicts that the Steelers will select Sorsby in the 3rd round of the supplemental draft. Uh, yeah, I mean that's obviously just a prediction on his part. I mean, a lot of people obviously are trying to give reasons of why Steelers should be mixed in on this, but I don't imagine that. I mean, we're still going to be discussing Sorsby, I would think, between now and the actual supplemental draft taking place. But I think we hit a lot of the meat on the bone as with everything revolving
Hmm.
around him at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let me see what we have in the hopper here as far as that goes. Paul Brown, Dave and Alex, I know you probably going to get a lot of Sorsby news in light of him coming out in the supplemental draft. To be honest, I know nothing of this guy and was trying to find a player profile of him on him. Do you guys have one or plan on doing one in the off chance the Steelers take a flyer on him? Been reading your player profiles for years, and I think it provides an excellent insight into the type of player they were in college. All right. So what do you have? What do we have a player profile? Will we be doing one on Sorsby between now and the supplemental draft?
We will. I plan on watching him and writing it up like a conventional report. So that won't come until a little bit closer towards the supplemental draft. I want to make sure he's officially part of it and gets cleared by the NFL and there's no other wrinkle and hurdle that comes along the way. But we will have one. It just has not been created yet.
Matt Palmer writes in, good morning, gentlemen. In your estimation, how much does having Drew Aller impact the Sorsby decision? Would you feel more strongly the team should put in a higher bid if Aller was not drafted? I feel like it would be hard to develop a quarterback if you're trying to develop 3 at the same time, or do you think the more rolls of the dice, the better? All right. The part of the question here is, would you feel more strongly the team should put in a higher bid if Aller was not drafted? Is it even worth? I mean, that's obviously a hypothetical, but I think we have to look into real time here at the fact that the team did draft Aller. They did spend a 3rd round pick on him. He is in Pittsburgh now. So hypotheticals outside of all that, I think, are not even worth a discussion personally. So in other words, no, I don't think now that Drew Aller is on the team, how does that play into the potential of what you think he can become versus I think you just got to look at it player and player. I think you've got to look at it at uh, what are your true thoughts on Sorsby? Do you think Sorsby has a chance of potentially being a better quarterback and a potential franchise quarterback than Aller? That's the question, I think. And as far as him saying, I feel like it'd be hard to develop a quarterback if you're trying to develop 3 at the same time. Yeah, I get that. If Sorsby is drafted by the Steelers in the supplemental draft, what does the rest of the offseason look like for him, especially coming in late, missing all the offseason program? He's already going to be behind the 8 ball. You're still obviously going to try to get practice time to Howard and Aller. And how do you try to fit in Sorsby late in 4th quarter of games to get him 8 snaps, maybe at max in each one of those 3 games? So you're going to get, let's say you get 25 snaps out of Sorsby, which is you could do. I mean, I I I don't think that's that hard of a thing to draw out. But once again, you're talking about 4th quarter, how much you really going to learn about him, and then assuming you keep him and 3 other quarterbacks on your 53-man roster, how in the hell are you going to get other than some scout team work? How are you going to get this guy any type of work once the regular season gets underway. So yeah, getting these two young quarterbacks work's going to be try to develop these guys going to be enough of a struggle, and then you add another one into it, it makes it even more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, obviously becomes a little less complicated from a roster construction standpoint if there wasn't Drew Aller on the roster, but the central question still comes down to Sorsby himself and the personal and the person and the gambling scandal, and my thoughts would be unchanged there. So I don't know if I would feel particularly stronger about it, but I would certainly say the odds of it happening in reality would be higher than they currently are.
Okay. And what do you think about the whole? Yeah, I mean, I think you addressed everything there. All right, Mark Alves has a interesting question about Steelers Depot and AI. He says, just curious if you are using AI at all to run Steelers Depot, and if so, how, or is it purely human brains and brawn? Mark, I'll tell you this: we are not big fans of AI at all. I think you see across the landscape of the impact that AI is having on content, whether it be Sports Illustrated or I could go down the list. I won't name any names here of other blogs using it. We do not support the use of AI in any way in content creation. Now, occasionally, and you've heard me talk about this on the podcast in the past, we have done some stat research to see how it compares uh, in to the real numbers and all, to see how AI handles that kind of thing. I mean, we've done some of this with the Aaron Rodgers and the rookie wide receivers and things along those lines. Uh, AI has its place maybe in some research aspects of it, but in no way, shape, or form do we use AI to formulate content around.
Yeah, we're pretty anti AI. We're going to sound like maybe boomers on here, but I'm pretty, and I know you are too, Dave. We're pretty strong in that stance. I
Yeah.
don't even use it for research purposes because it gets a lot of stuff wrong, and you just can't trust that information that it's going to pull all correct or all accurate information. So, yeah, we really don't have any sort of meaningful relationship or usefulness of AI for Steelers Depot, and that's our intent going forward. And it's going to become increasingly more challenging as
Right.
AI advances and becomes more prevalent. But we view it as I'll say
A
I
big
view it
taboo.
a taboo. I view it as a threat more than
Yeah.
anything that's an aid, and that doesn't even get into all the other environmental ramifications of AI that are it's a separate conversation.
And the thing is, being as we are so strong in trying to give us factual and educational aspect, and making sure we try to make every post as valuable as quite possible within this, and then to have just globally AI bots come along and use our stuff to further increase the knowledge of the AI is troublesome for us as well too.
Yeah, it's something we're working behind the scenes to try to uh, limit, but obviously it's an uphill battle in terms of AI crawlers and things like that.
All right, Paul Lutz writes in, hello, gentlemen. Fantastic job. As always, I have two questions. Would Brendan Sorsby declaring for the supplemental draft? What team do you see him going to, and why is it Cleveland? The second question, Dave, you recently said during the live stream that this Steelers team will be hard pressed to win the division or make the playoffs. So far this offseason, most of the talk has been positive. The roster seems better. There's more depth and the coaching staff has improved. Why, in your opinion, do you see this team doing worse and not better? First and foremost, I give my thoughts on this team as the offseason progresses. From where I am right now might not necessarily be where my prediction is come the final prediction before the start of the regular season. The quarterback position, specifically with Aaron Rodgers, and even though the roster, I believe I've talked several times, not only on the podcast but on the live stream as well too. It does feel like this team has a better 91-man roster, and particularly probably a better 91-man roster than this time last year. I think we've talked about, man, when it comes to 53-man rosters at this time of the offseason, there are a lot. Feels like there are a lot more of different ways, a lot of tough decisions, as opposed to maybe previous years where it is at this time. I boil it all down to the quarterback position, Aaron Rodgers, the ability to press the football down the field, the ability to lean on the running game as dependent as I think that they should be able to. I just I wonder if the play of Aaron Rodgers is going to be strong enough, and will he be able to stay healthy long enough and really throughout, and maybe only miss a game or two. Uh, I'm worried about the quarterback play, most notably Rodgers. That has a lot of root into why I think, from where I sit right now, this team will be hard pressed to win the division and potentially make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I'll save my thoughts and yet to really even form my thoughts on where Pittsburgh will ultimately finish this year. But the roster, I think, is in good shape. I have an article coming out tomorrow that I think the roster looks just good right now, and just a very simple phrase and term to use. I think it's been upgraded in a lot of ways, and every step of the way, even with some of the more minor moves that have happened this month. I think they've still gotten better at the bottom of the roster. And so, I mean, it's in terms of like what's a screaming need for the team at this moment, there really isn't much. I think a lot of the holes have been addressed.
Yeah, I look once again. I think the way this 91-man roster is, as of June the 19th, I think it's in great shape. I think this team's got a lot of tough decisions ahead of them. I like the makeup of it overall, right now. So I do think they're in a good place. But we'll learn a lot more about this team, obviously, once training camp gets underway, and obviously the closer we get to the regular season, we'll see how injuries impact the situation, and uh, you know, the proof will ultimately be in the pudding. The way people know over the years that have followed me on this site and the podcast as well too. I remain very fluid with this team, moving on into giving my my final prediction for this team. So where I'm at right now, I might feel even a more negative light, or I might feel a little bit more positive light overall. Do I think this team's going to go 6-11 from where I sit right now? No, I do not. But do I think the offensively, at least, do I think this will be a team that's going to put up 11 wins from where I sit right now? No, I do not. So, I just like to give people, a chance to take my temperature along the way here, and that's where I'm at on this team right now.
So your thoughts right now is pretty much more of the same 9-10 win season.
Uh, from where I sit right now, I probably have about a 9-win season right now.
Playoffs?
Not right now, no.
Okay.
I wonder if Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to stay healthy, and I wonder if they're going to be able to get the quarterback play out of him that they need. Aaron Rodgers can win you games. Can he win you enough games? Overall, how does it? Will the defense be as good as it needs to be? I think the defense will be better, or I'm expecting it to be better than it was last year, specifically in the pass defense aspect of it. But will it be enough? And will the improvements on offense, Aaron Rodgers specifically, be enough to push it over the edge, where we're not talking about a mid team scrambling with the last game to get in, and then wondering if this team will be one and done in the playoffs?
Yeah, fair. I don't have maybe your reservations about Rogers' health, but I certainly can have reservations about his ability in an AFC North that'll, as of right now, have a healthy Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and how Pittsburgh stacks up. But I don't have a prediction right now.
All right. I mean, do you where are you? 9 or 10 wins? 11?
Like I said, I really don't have a strong
Oh,
feeling or
you
prediction.
want me to put a prediction?
I didn't make. I listen. I'm the one asking the questions. I know.
Uh,
I really do. I really honestly just don't have one. I mean, if you didn't have one, I think that'd be fine. I just don't really think about those things too much until right before the season starts.
Look, I will reiterate once again, this the biggest thing for this time of the off season right now on June the 19th. I like where the 91 man roster is right now. So if you're a Steelers fan right now, I think you should like where this roster is right now.
Yeah. And hopefully it stays healthy and looks just as good throughout the summer.
All right, let's take one more for Bill Ewan in Columbus, Ohio here. Got one for you, Dave. Nobody better to explain this question. First, a hypothetical. Herbig was signed this year and the cap hit starts next year. The Steelers could sign Highsmith next year and the cap hit starts next year. So they could keep all three for the next 2 years. Let's say the next year Watt wants to stay and the Steelers want him, but he isn't worth 40 plus million anymore. He says, don't worry, I'm not asking you to analyze the hypothetical. I'm asking how that could work. Take the names out of it. How do you take a contract that has a $46 million cap hit and get it to 15 million, add years with no new money, just trying to wrap my head around the contract. I guess he's talking about Watt particularly here, even though he says, I mean, look, could you get to a point next offseason where Highsmith's looking for an extension? I mean, I suppose specifically, I guess if Watt becomes maybe you get in a situation where you want to cut Watt or whatnot. I mean, look, Highsmith has to have. We have to see Highsmith stay healthy and double digit sacks and have a solid season. If you're going to move forward in that aspect, there, the fact that you don't have a franchise quarterback under contract likely, and I'm speaking globally and thinking that they won't go after uh, uh, Baker Mayfield either or anything along those lines. You can manipulate around it with restructures, extensions, and all like that. It it would be a good problem to have if after this season we're talking about a potential of Highsmith signing a deal and then thus yeah, his cap hit of what it's scheduled to be next year would likely go down a little bit as part of that restructure. I mean, part of that extension. That would be a good conversation to have, and especially if it's boy, look what Herbig did in 2026, and you have more confidence there. And boy, T.J. Watt rebounded and 15, 16 sacks along those lines. I think people are looking way too. I understand why they're doing it, but you got to worry about 2026 because what happens in 2026 will go a long, long way as far as talk about all three of these linebackers remaining in Pittsburgh, even in 2027, if that makes sense.
Sure, I understand. It's a lot of the ground we've covered before, so we'll kind of take it for this year. I expect all three to be here in 2026, and where it goes and starting next off season is a different story, but we'll have a lot more information to make those decisions and predictions with.
Look, the fact that you're unlikely to have a franchise cap impacting quarterback on the roster in 2027 makes it a little bit easier to work around the other aspects of it there. And look, I mean, you Herbig, obviously, he's going to move to the forefront of a potential restructure candidate a year from now, right? I mean, if he plays the way you think that what you signed him to this year, if he goes out and continues to progress and you have confidence with him, obviously moving into 2027 and beyond, you can restructure his contract and lower his cap hit next year as well, right? So there's
Sure.
already one workaround there should you run into a cap space issue here. But once again, we're going to get a lot of our answers when it comes to Herbig, Highsmith, and Watt as to what they do on the field in 2026, and it'll make it at least a little bit easier after the season to maybe start hypothetically looking at how this team goes about keeping all three of those guys under contract for at least the 2027 season.
Yeah, it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
Okay, we got through some emails there. We had probably a way too long talk about Sorsby there. We went over some of the recent transactions. I think I think we did more than not mail it in today.
Yeah, we try to do our best. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we'll be back on Monday.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Where do you come in on the Sorsby situation? Hypothetically, being as how we get asked hypothetically, how could you see the Steelers going about? Is there any scenario, even if you're against the Steelers, adding Sorsby in the supplemental draft, is there a hypothetical way you could see that potentially actually coming to fruition, and would you be on board with it? In what way whatsoever would you be potentially on board with Sorsby being a supplemental draft pick for him? So, just kind of inviting, because we're going to need some things I think to talk about on the Monday show here. So let's get some feedback on how some of the listeners feel about Sorsby. So you can, if you want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. We will be back on Monday. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.